My name is Willy Lermer, and I'm born in Krakow, Poland. And then in 1929 and 1930, there was a worldwide depression where people lost their jobs, lost their belongings. It was a very, very poor situation. Unemployment extremely high. Although I have been a kid of 5, 6 years old at the time, I didn't know much about it, didn't understood it, but I just knew that my parents lost everything. We had to get out from our apartment where we lived, which was quite comfortable, and we had to get squeezed into one room. And also at the same time, in 1929, I gained a sister. My parents rented a shop, which they converted into a kosher coffee lounge. So I was with them, and of course my mother was the chef, and my father was in front of the shop, and we worked on. Later, after a couple of years later, things improved, and we have been lucky to obtain an apartment above our shop. My parents worked very hard. You know, they used to get up 6 in the morning, and they didn't close the coffee lunch till about 11 because they served breakfast, lunch, dinners, and suppers when people came out from theaters or movies, come in for a bite to eat or have a cup of coffee. Now, the only really happy times were Friday nights and Saturdays, where we all sat down and we had a meal together. It was wonderful. Being religious, we sang songs on Friday evenings, as usual, and Saturday lunch when you came back from the synagogue. They were very happy times for me. Now, life has changed completely for us. First of all, there was a mobilization, and my father had to report to the Polish army camp to join the army. And I was at the time about 15, 16, but I was a big boy, so I could get away as 18. I know because I used to go to movies which were only for 18-year-olds, and nobody questioned me because I looked older. So I wanted to join the army with my father together, to go with him. Of course, my mother didn't want it. She knew more about the war than I did. To me, it was fun, till I found out just a few days later that it's not such a fun. And of course, the tragedy of humiliation, degradation, torture started. It went slowly, slowly. The noose got tighter and tighter around our necks. The Jews were persecuted. We had to queue up to get a kilo bread per person. So I, my father, my mother went out just around the corner to a bakery, which was known Turkish bakery, but they baked normal bread. And we queued up at 2 in the morning. It was extremely cold. The nights already in autumn in Poland are very cold. It was extremely cold, and we stood there from 2 o'clock in the morning till 9 when they opened the shop. Shortly before 9, one Pole whom I happen to know, because he used to come to our place to have some gefilte fish and have a glass of wine or meat to drink or a glass of beer. He enjoyed the food. Even with his son, I used to play soccer, you know, in the park. And he comes in here, and on the left arm he has got a swastika, you know, a red armband with a white circle and underneath a black swastika. I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe it. And he comes and kicks all the Jews out from the queue. We have been probably the 10th or 15th there. And my father spoke to him and he said, "You better go before I kill you. If you want, go at the end of the queue, and if there is bread left, you're welcome to it." Of course, there was no hope, because the queue was so long. Another incident, I was at a friend's place, and I could see through the window. The Germans didn't recognize a Jew very well. But the Orthodox Jews who were wearing the long beards with the side locks and black coats, they knew. So sometimes one took out a bayonet and cut off the beard of the Jew, of the Orthodox Jew, and another one put a match to another one's, and it burned. One went in and put a match to his beard, and they were all dancing and laughing, and of course there were some of the civilian population there who were just laughing and screaming, "Jude, Jude," you know, Jew, Jew. And that put really a fear onto me. Then in 15th of December 1939, an edict was issued that all the Jews from age, I think, of 12, if I remember correctly, have to wear on a right forearm an armband, which was a white one, about 12 centimeters wide, and in the middle a blue Star of David. Now, non-compliance with this order, the penalty is death. I was taken for a whole day's work, and I tell you, we had to cart ropes, desks, all sorts of that on the 4th floor, high up. We carted it all up, 3rd floor, 2nd floor, 4th floor, and the Germans standing on every floor with their whip and helped us out to get quicker. And then came lunchtime, and that's the ironic part of it. They said, lunchtime. So we all assembled, and then they came over and he said, "Now you're going to get a kosher pork stew." There were a few Orthodox Jews. Well, I was religious. I have never eaten unkosher food until then. And then when, from 6 o'clock in the morning, I didn't eat nothing. It was about 12, 12:30. So they gave everybody sort of a plate, and they put that stew in it and a piece of bread and go and eat. So I sat down and I ate it. And I ate it up and it was okay. Now the Orthodox, they ate the bread but didn't touch the stew. The German police, they were watching who eats, who doesn't eat. Now they come up and they took those few people, probably there were 8 or 10 of them, who didn't eat, and they said, "What? You, for the goodness of our heart, we try to feed you, that you are strong, that you can work, and you don't want to eat our food? You pig, we'll show you. We're going to have a little bit sport." That's what they called it. So they made the people run and then drop, you know, fall down, get up and run, then squat, jump in a squatting position. And then they made them squat and stretch the hands out. And of course everybody got beaten because they weren't so flexible. After half an hour or more, they let them go and put them to work. Around 5 o'clock, I was released. They told me, "Oh, you were good, you can go home now." I came home, and I can tell you for 3 days I couldn't move. I got beaten a few times, but not as savagely as the others. But I found out that I got muscles that I never knew existed. For 3 days I couldn't move around. Now I met some of those fellows who were on those sport, Some ended up in hospital with broken ribs, another had a broken nose, and battered. Spent in hospital some 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and so on. In 1940, could have been springtime or autumn, I don't remember, but it was in 1940, and I had a girlfriend, and I made somehow arrangement with her to meet to go to the park. And there was a small portion of the big park which surrounded the old city of Krakow, which surrounds actually still known as Planty. A small part of it was permitted for Jews to go. And we made arrangements to go to that park. Maybe we'll be able to grab a bench somewhere to sit down and, you know, spend the time. And when we came in, there were a few entrances there. Through one entrance, I have seen the following incident. There was one assessment walking, and from the other side came a Jewish boy, probably was 20, 21, and the assessment called him, and he said to him, "Why don't you take off the cap to show respect to a German?" Or something to this. And so he said there was no order or an edict that we should do that. He hit him once and twice. He fell down, he made him get up, and hit him again, gave him a kick, and he says, "Now you know. When you see a German, you take off your cap and get lost." He walks, and then another assessment goes behind. So he beaten up, takes off the cap, doesn't say nothing, and the assessment calls him, and he says, "What are you, my comrade? You are my friend, how dare you even to talk to me? How dare you even to lift your heads to me?" And he beat him up again. So we got both frightened. She went home and I went home. And what I was hoping to have a pleasant afternoon ended in nothing. So there were small things, but being a young person, a teenager, to me, at that time, it was very frustrating. In May 1942, we were taken 30 of us, and my uncle was included, my father wasn't, and were taken to Plaszow, to Camp Plaszow, Gulag 1. Gulag means Judenlager, it's a Jewish labor camp. Quite simple. And the ghetto was still existing, and they started to build that big Camp Plaszow, which is known, just across the road, up on a hill, on top of a Jewish cemetery. That was the new Jewish cemetery in Krakow. And so we were sent there. We worked for a German construction firm, Joseph Klug, from Regensburg in Germany, Bavaria, and we were building railroads. Now, there broke out the epidemic of typhus, and I got caught in it. We didn't get any medication or anything. We were put in one separate barrack, and there were double bunks, and on every bunk, two slept, head to feet, two on one, and the doctors came around and lifted the eyelid to have a look whether you were alive or not. If you have been dead, so they took you out and they buried you. And I remember I had fever about 42 Celsius degrees all the time. And once you had to queue up to go to the toilet, and I couldn't hold on because the queue was reasonably long, and I fainted. And I dirtied myself, and I got beaten up, and I had to clean myself up. And I hardly could stand on my feet. I was dizzy. And somehow I survived. After 2 weeks, the fever dropped, and they dropped me up back to my barrack. All my things which I had were stolen, were gone. I had nothing, just a pair of pants and a kind of a working shirt, and that was it. No underwear, no shoes, nothing, everything gone. And then they gave me 1 week convalescence. Now, in the middle of the week, the rumor was flying around the camp that anybody who is in the camp sick, they're going to be shot. So I barefoot, got up, and went to work. After that, what I was sick, I was taken to 104 of us were sent to the real camp up on the hill there. And there when we came up, there was a kind of a selection, and they picked out 12 people who were taken to the place of execution, and they were executed. 12 people who they thought they are unfit for work. Amon Goeth was a vicious sadist. You know, to call him an animal, that would be an insult to the animal. Because you couldn't even call him an animal. For him to kill somebody, it was like for you to have a cup of tea when you thirst. For instance, he had a habit that he sneak up on people. And somebody had arrest or whatever. He could either order him to receive lashings, or he could kill him. He could order to give him lashings and he killed him later, right afterwards. Could do that too. He used to go up on a balcony and pick up a rifle. I remember many times we could see him. He was always in a white shirt. He hasn't been wearing his full uniform. He had only the trousers and the boots from his uniform. We could see even his braces he was wearing with the trousers and a white shirt, and he picked up a rifle with a telescopic lens and was eyeing the people down there, pulled the trigger and somebody dropped that. Apparently he was an excellent shot. They went once to hang one engineer who something he done wrong, and when they went to hang him, he had hidden a razor blade and he cut his veins, and he was bleeding profusely. So he came and he ordered 3 doctors there. He said, "You save his life. If he dies, you die too." And they work, and eventually they stopped him bleeding and put him onto the gallows. So when I arrived, I thought, well, that's the end of it. I'm going to be dead. And then when we got unloaded from the train, we could smell something. But you didn't think about it. You know, you're getting a little bit selfish. You think about yourself, how you're going to survive, how you're going to live, whether you're going to live or not. We didn't go through a selection process at all, like all the transports did. We were taken straight to the camp. We have been, I believe, about 1,500 or so, and they were including about 200 or 300 women. And the women, of course, were separated from us, taken to the women's camp, and we were marched straight inside the camp. Now we came in front of a building, and they were taking 70, 80 people at one time inside. Went in, and what I saw first was heaps of clothes on my right-hand side when I walked in. And the SS there with whips hitting, screaming, "Get undressed, quick, 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 get undressed." Well, we had no option. Then we had been ordered to go to barbers who have shorn our hair from the head, under the arms, everywhere. And then we came in front of another door which said Brausenbad, which means bathhouse, showers. And before we went in, we have been disinfected. And the disinfection looked like that there were 2 inmates there who had 2 buckets with some fluid, with its disinfectant, some rags or mitties, and they dipped it in, and once over the head, under the arms, between the legs, go in. I even recall that some of the stuff went into my eye, and I stopped for a second, you know, to rub my eye because it was hurting. I got a whack from somewhere, from the back. I don't know who did it. And of course I moved in. When I came into the bathhouse, I saw water pipes, shower heads. And so I thought to myself, I will go right underneath the shower head, because I thought that the gas comes through the shower head. So when I will be close underneath, the gas will hit me, and I take a couple deep breaths. So I go quick. If I will be further away, by the time the gas comes to me, I will cough, I will choke, I will suffer. And once, you know, the room was full, they closed the door, and the water came down. You know, thinking back, because those are things which they are so engraved in my brain. I forget a lot of things, but I can't forget any of those. I was touching myself to make sure this is water. I even stick my hand out, you know, make it sort of like a cup, and put it to my lips to drink. And then I realized it is water. And before I realized all that, they switched it off and out. We didn't get any soap or towels to dry. We came out through the other door, and there were tables, and on the tables there was clothes, and they threw us a shirt, a jacket, and a pair of pants. Didn't matter whether it fits or not fit. That was not a fitting room. What you got, that's it. You got it small, it's bad luck. You got it bigger, well, it's good luck. You see, bigger you can wear, smaller it's a bit harder. Well, anyhow, and get dressed quickly. We got dressed, and once I was going out through the exit door, there the smell of burning hit me. And I had a look for a fraction of a second, and I could see smoke. I could see flames of fire. I didn't know what it was, to be quite honest, at that time. Now I know, of course, but then I didn't know. And then the SS straight away line up in fives, and we're surrounded by the guards with dogs, guns on the ready, and we're ordered to keep our heads down. Don't look right, don't look left, don't look up. I found out later on when we got to the camp that we were about a couple 100 meters from the gas chambers and the crematoria, not far, very close. Once everybody came in, we were marched in to a compound known as the Gypsy Camp. Next day, I have been tattooed with a number on my left forearm, and my number is B5068. And then they came and they asked, what's your profession, your trade? And I knew already by experience you got to have a trade. So I said that I'm an assistant bricklayer. I have learned, but now I'm an assistant bricklayer. Oh, it's okay, we need somebody like that. So I was put to work, and we worked on the women's transit camps for about 3-4 weeks. I worked there. One day I was working there in the women's camp, and women were bringing bricks from somewhere, probably from a boxcar somewhere, and they were carrying 2 or 3 bricks every woman was carrying. Now, the women were very poorly dressed. They only had a frock, not underwear, not nothing. And then working, and somebody calls my name, and I was looking at the woman, maybe I meet somebody I know, an auntie, a cousin. I look and I don't see anybody. And they call me again and again and again. And then I had a look, and then she says to me, don't you recognize me? I'm Dolly, your cousin. I said, oh my God. She had a mini frock. And here was open, so her breast came out, and she still had some of her shyness. So she lifted the bricks up, you know, a bit higher to cover I didn't recognize her, but she was about 3 or 4 years older than myself. That means when I knew her, home or even during the war, I met her many times. She was always impeccably dressed, her hair beautiful done, and she was a very good-looking girl. And I couldn't believe it. Hair shone, walking, no shoes, barefoot, It really, although I was already hardened with camp life, being already 2 years incarcerated, over 2 years, it really hit me. And the next day, I know that she went on a transport to Stutthof. And I don't think she survived because I have never heard from her. That's at the feet of the hills, the Alps, and being November, December, it was extremely cold, snow already. We haven't been too well dressed. And as far as food is concerned, there was the worst from all the other camps that I was there. There was practically no food. What I recall, we used to get in the morning so-called coffee, which was brown water. And we queued up for the coffee, and if you have been in the middle of the queue or towards the end, by the time you got that, it was cold water, cold brown water. Then we went to work and we got a soup there, which very hardly you could find some potatoes or some other vegetable like carrots, turnip, anything like that, you could find there. And in the evening we got again a soup like that and a loaf of bread. At first we divided that into 8 portions and then 10 portions. Of course that was about 100-150 grams of bread a day. Sometimes we did get a small, very small piece of horse sausage or a small piece of cheese, spreading cheese. And that was it. And so of course, working under those conditions, they didn't execute any people. People just dropped dead from hunger. And I used to dig deep into the snow, to find some blades of grass or some weeds, pull them out, put them in my pocket, and when I got the soup, I put it in. I have once, I don't know whether I should even mention that, have eaten a piece of a dog. See, the Germans had a dog who was limping, and so they shot him. And then they ordered a couple people to bring the dog and bury him inside the camp. They said dogs have to be with dogs. So they buried him, and then somebody came up to me and said, look, you stand and watch if somebody comes, and we'll give you a piece. So I did that, of course. I was hungry. They took the dog out, cut him up in pieces. They shared between themselves. I got a small bone. And I had a pot about 2 liters big, to which I collected my soup, my thing. I washed it with snow because the water pipes have frozen, so we didn't have any water, and you could only wash with snow. And I took that into the barrack and I made some water from snow, and the oven happened to be burning, and I had some salt because they were spreading pink salt onto the concrete that it doesn't freeze. The concrete doesn't freeze. So I put some salt in it, I put my portion of bread in it, and that day we got a piece of cheese, and I put the cheese in it as well, with the bone, with 2 liters of water, and I cooked it and cooked it. And when it was well cooked, I took it and I started to eat. And I tell you, that was the best soup I have eaten for a long, long time. I wouldn't eat one today like that, but at that time it was something special. I got friendly with one chap because he happened to be a brother of my teacher. He was at the time about 35 or so old. And we marched one day from work. He looked well, you know. He used to go peel potatoes. He got for that a soup, and he stole some potatoes. And he looked pretty good. And one day we were marching back to the barrack, and suddenly his knees started to buckle underneath him. I tried to grab them and yelled out to the fellow next from the other side, but we couldn't hold him. It was too heavy, and he was dead. Luckily, they were carrying their ladder. We put him on the ladder and took him to the camp so that the numbers are correct. And then they buried him there somewhere, wherever they did. And that was that. Then about 3 or 4 days before liberation, they took us from Camp 11, in which I was. There were 13 camps, to Camp 1. And from there, they said, those who can march, they're going on a march, which was usually a death march. And I couldn't. I was already too weak. I just sat down, and that was the first time where I gave in to myself. Otherwise, I was all the time, my mind was always pushing me, get up, get up. And eventually, there came a train, they put us on a train, and I got in a carriage which was roofless, and we traveled 1.5 days to Dachau. I was very sick, suffered terribly from diarrhea, apart from other bits which I didn't know. And when we came to Dachau, we didn't get a shower. There was just a huge barrel with water. So I put my finger in and washed my face and a bit of hands. And that was it. And then I was ordered to a barrack there. And next day in the evening, the American troops arrived and were liberated. That was the 29th of April, 1945. I didn't believe at that stage that I'm liberated. And when they wanted to take me to hospital, I didn't want to go. I was hiding. But eventually they found me, of course, and they took me on a stretcher straight to an ambulance, and they drove me up to a tent. And in this tent, there were already 3 stretchers with sick there. And I was the 4th one at the time. I think they brought with me 4 people, so I must have been the 7th. And we were waiting. There was a canvas curtain there, and I thought, what's going to happen to us? Eventually, my turn came in, and they took the stretchers and brought me behind that curtain, that canvas. And there they put me on a table. And from the top was a pink hose with a pink kind of a shower head. Must have been rubber. And I got very scared because the 2 men who were there, they were wearing surgical gowns and surgical masks, so you couldn't see who they are. And I said, they're going to kill me here or make some experiments on me. That's what was in my mind. Then they undressed me. They didn't have much. I had a piece of blanket and a shirt. And I didn't have any underwear or any trousers because having diarrhea, I dirty it all. And people were screaming, it stinks, so I had to throw it out. So I was already naked. And then they came and they wanted to take my pot away and my spoon. And I didn't want to let it go, but of course they were stronger than me. They took it out and I started to cry. I remember I was crying. I said, this is the end of my life. But then lukewarm water came on the body. I had a lot of lice like the rest of us because lack of sanitation. And my body was itching, bitten by the lice. So the feeling of that warm water was unbelievable. I still, after 50 odd years, 60 years, I still can't find a proper expression how wonderful it felt. You know, it's indescribable. Then they dried me with a beautiful white towel. You know, I haven't seen one for about 3 years or so. And then they sprayed me with DDT, gave me a brand new flannel pyjama. I still remember the stripes were pink, blue, and gray, light gray or off-white. Beautiful narrow stripes. And then they put me on a stretcher and took me to the barrack. I was in hospital. Then I realized I'm liberated. And I spent about 7 weeks in hospital. Recuperated physically. I gained weight from 40 kilos to about 70, 72. There one day came an American general. He wanted to see the camp. And I took him around the camp. I showed him the crematoria there. There were gas chambers. And the place where they shoot people. There was a special area, shooting range. And then there was a thick branch on a tree where they hung people. And then there were the solitary confinements, and we were going around. Ilse Koch was there, you know, the one who used to make lampshades from human skins, from the tattoos. Many other criminals. And then I come out to one gate and I see Amon Goeth. And I tell you what, I started to shake out. I don't know whether I was angry, whether I was scared. I don't know. I just started to shake. And after a while, I took hold of myself and I asked the general, he asked me, you know this fellow? I said, yes, I do. He said, General, could you order them to open the door and I can go in there for 5-10 minutes? And the general had a look at me and he said, yes, I can do that, but before I do that, I want you to consider something. Now, if you go in there, I have a very good idea what you intend doing, but if you go in there and do that what you want to do, you will become exactly like him. Isn't it better to leave it for the court to deal with this case instead that you behave yourself like he did? And I thought for a second and I said, no, General, I think you are right. Thank you very much for giving me this advice. And that was the end. He was taken, Amon Goeth was taken, he was extradited actually to Poland, to Krakow. He was tried. He had a solicitor because I read in Polish the book about his trial. And he was sentenced to death and he was executed in Poland. There is one cousin of mine who survived the camp. When he went, he was in Plaszow, and somehow he got on Schindler's List, and he survived with him. His mother was also, he had his mother and his younger brother in Plaszow. They were sent to Auschwitz and they were destroyed there, they were killed there. Then I had one family who escaped to the Soviet Union and they survived in Russia. They are living down in America and in Canada. Apart from that, nobody survived. I have a final message to the people, to next generations. We have a wonderful country here, Australia, wonderful country, beautiful government system, democracy. We have the right to complain. We know the government is not perfect. None of them is. Doesn't matter what side of politics they are not perfect. And we're complaining. But the most important thing is that we have the right to complain. And also, we have here in Australia 100, 120, whatever, ethnic groups. And it looks to me that we living in peace with each other, which is wonderful. I mean, there might be the odd incident, but in general, we're getting on with each other. So, hatred is a terrible disease, like cancer. Please, don't hate. Don't hate a fellow human being. I can understand you can't like everybody, you can't love everybody, but what you have to do is those who you don't like, you don't love, you have to tolerate him. Don't incite others to hate him. Let's keep the motto, do not hate, but tolerate.